Hey everybody, Nick Espinoza, your chief security fanatic here, and it is Sunday, and we are doing breaches of the week. And let me say, it's great to get back basically to a normal schedule, actually do these on Sunday. The last month has just been mired with travel. I've spent just dozens of hours on airplanes, in airports, all of that for speaking engagements and everything else. And so it's nice basically to get back to a routine. And we are playing catch up for the last couple of weeks on data breaches. So this one is probably going to be extra long. And then obviously next week, we will have the standard week to week. But I'd like to thank the following people that actually sent me a ton of this information, and it really does help me out. And thank you so very much. I'm glad that I was able to communicate and say thank you to Chris Fallon, Barrett Peterson, Jacqueline Wolf, Armand Harishi, Stephen Cooper, and Miranda Villanova. Thank you all for sending me most of these, and let's just dive right in because we have no time to lose today. And we are starting in South Australia with the MySAgov accounts. Now, South Australia's Department for Infrastructure and Transport confirmed that MySAgov accounts were compromised through a cyber attack. Now, MySAgov is the South Australian government's online platform and app that provides residents with single account access for the state's services such as checking into a venue or completing transactions for things like vehicle registration. The department said that attackers access these accounts as account holders use the same or similar password for their MySAgov account as they had used for unrelated websites. Basically, all y'all are using the same password to log into everything. They found it on one, they found it on another. Now, the attackers then used those passwords and obtained access to the website and those accounts. And according to the Australian Broadcasting Corporation News, or ABC News down there, 2,601 MySAgov accounts were accessed, with 2,008 of them containing registration and licensing information. So if you're in South Australia, heads up to you. Moving on, let's talk about the Maryland-based Diamond Comic Distributors. They suffered a ransomware attack that temporarily took down their website and disrupted their ability to process customer orders. Now, Diamond Comic Distributors is the top middleman for transporting Marvel, Dark Horse, and Image comics to retail stores. So this obviously impacted numerous comic book markets. The affected shipments currently include comics that were bound for points in Baltimore, Boston, and Dallas, and obviously this delayed these. So if you're a big comic book fan and you're in Baltimore, Boston, or Dallas, it may take you some time to get your favorite comic books or the latest versions or whatever you're buying. Moving on. Let's talk about Sunwater, which is an Australian government-owned water supplier responsible for operating 19 major dams in Australia, 80 pumping stations, and 1,600 miles of pipeline. Now, Sunwater was breached for 9 months. Essentially, the attackers gained persistence and were not detected. This occurred between August of 2020 through May of 2021. And they accessed a web server used to store customer information. It appears the attackers weren't interested in exfiltration of sensitive data, according to the report, as they instead just planted custom malware to increase visitor traffic to an online platform for ad revenue. And here we are. So if you're a Sunwater customer in Australia, heads up to you. Coming back here to the United States, let's talk about massive retail chain Costco. They warned customers in notification letters sent this month that their payment card information might have been stolen while recently shopping at one of their stores. Now, Costco discovered this data breach after finding a payment card skimming device in one of their warehouses during a routine check conducted by Costco personnel. A skimming device basically oftentimes will overlay on a standard credit card machine, like you see them at gas pumps and all of that. So it'll steal your credit card information as you're legitimately paying, and there you go. Costco removed the device, notified the authorities, and is now working with law enforcement to basically figure out who did this. Customer payment information was likely stolen via this skimming device. So hopefully they'll get that straightened out soon. But if you're a Costco customer, you might be receiving a letter in the mail. And if you are, check your credit card statements and change your credit card numbers. Moving on, let's talk about an REvil or REvil. This is the massive ransomware gang. This is an update because the U.S. Department of Justice on November 8th announced charges against the REvil ransomware, against a REvil ransomware affiliate for the attack against the Kaseya managed service provider platform on July 2nd, and seizing more than $6 million from another rival partner. Now, the suspect is 22-year-old Ukrainian national Yaroslav Vesninsky. He was arrested for cybercriminal activity on October 8th at the behest of the U.S. government when trying to enter Poland from his native country of Ukraine. Now, according to the indictment, Vesninsky is a longtime affiliate of the RevilWare ransomware operation, being part of it since at least March of 2019 and deployed about 2,500 attacks against businesses worldwide. The investigation revealed that Wisniewski's ransom demands amounted to $667 million worth of ransoms, but his victims only paid $2.3 million. Still, it's a pretty good payday. The operator is believed to have deployed ransomware on the networks of at least 9 companies here in the United States. In contrast, the entire Revil ransomware operation received actually more than $200 million since it started activity and has encrypted at least 175,000 computers. So he is a small player in that overall 200 million, basically just over 1% of their entire revenue, but still glad to see that's happening. Hopefully Kaseya will get some money back. The reputation, not so much. Moving on, let's talk about Premier Property Lawyers in the United Kingdom. They had a quote-unquote security incident that left some of their systems inaccessible, causing property purchases to be held up. Now, their customers complained basically about a lack of communication and difficulty in contacting this firm, and PPL said that it was working to basically restore their systems. So if you have anything to do with Premier Property Lawyers in the UK, that's why they are been slow to respond. Hopefully they're back on their feet. Moving on, let's talk about Spain's second biggest beer maker, known as DAM. They basically halted output on their main brewery outside of Barcelona after a cyber attack hit its computer systems basically 2 weeks ago. And this is according to a spokesperson last Friday. Now, the attack hit their brewery on that Tuesday night for a few hours, again, near Barcelona, which produced 7 million hectoliters of beer per year, and they were entirely paralyzed, according to their head of communications. Now, the head of communications declined to say whether a ransomware was demanded of the company, or who was behind this attack, but here we are. So if you're a fan of DAM beer in Spain, heads up to you. They may be slow to produce at the moment. Moving on, let's talk about electronics retail giant Mediamarket. This is in Europe. They're Europe's largest media electronics retail provider, from what I've read. They got hit with Hive ransomware, an initial ransom demand of $240 million US. That's crazy. And obviously, their operations were shut down and disrupted in the Netherlands and Germany. Now, while online sales continue to function as expected, cash registers at actual stores could not accept credit cards or print receipts at these affected stores. The system's outage is also preventing returns due to the inability to look up these purchases. Local media reports that internal Mediamarket communications told employees to avoid encrypted systems and to disconnect cash registers from the network at their physical location. So hopefully Mediamarket will get essentially unstuck by this massive ransomware attack. But 240 million in ransom is a massive, massive number, and we see these continuing to increase. So that is obviously, I think, an unfortunate sign of the times. Moving on. Let's talk about Transavia airline. The Dutch Data Protection Agency has levied a 400,000 euro, or roughly 455,000 US fine against Transavia, which is a Dutch airline that operates low-cost routes across Europe, for a security breach that allowed attackers to steal the personal details of more than 83,000 passengers, but up to roughly 25 million may have been affected. Now, the fine pertains basically to the security breach that Transavia had in February of 2020. Dutch officials said that Transavia used weak security practices, such as easy-to-guess passwords and no two-factor or multi-factor authentication, which allowed an attacker to gain control over the accounts of 2 of its own IT staff. Obviously not a good sign at all. So if you've flown Transavia airline, you may be entitled to compensation. Moving on. let's talk about the nearly 4,000 devices that are made by a wide range of vendors in the healthcare, government, and retail sector, because researchers say they have found more than a dozen vulnerabilities in software used in medical devices and machinery, basically in other industries as well, that if exploited could cause critical equipment such as patient monitors to actually crash. Now, the vulnerabilities affect versions of the Nucleus Real-Time Operating System, which is a suite of software owned by Siemens that manages data across critical networks. There's no evidence that malicious attackers have taken advantage of these software flaws, and doing so would require prior access to the network in some cases, according to researchers. But Siemens, the individual firm that owns this software, has now issued updates to fix the vulnerabilities. Siemens is working with federal officials and researchers to verify and address the vulnerabilities through software updates. And so if you are running or manufacturing anything that is integrating the Nucleus Real-Time Operating System by Siemens, you have to make sure that you are updating those, especially products you've already sold out there, because God forbid we have another pacemaker situation where somebody can hijack the Bluetooth and blow up your heart. So that's a huge problem. Moving on. Let's talk about Robinhood. This is the investment app that's made news for its cryptocurrency woes and all of that. But they just said that attackers breached the account of a customer support employee, stole the personal data of millions of users, and then tried to extort the company for a ransom when they eventually detected this intrusion. Now, this hack took place on Wednesday, November 3, according to emails obtained by The Record, and Robinhood sent customers emails as well earlier that day. Quote, the unauthorized party socially engineered a customer support employee by phone and obtained access to certain customer support systems. Via this account, Robinhood said that the intruder was able to access and collect vast quantities of data. And we are talking about email addresses for at least 5 million users, real names for 2 million, name, date of birth, and zip code for roughly 310 users, and extensive personal data for 10 users roughly. So obviously a huge problem. If you use Robinhood for investment, heads up to you, you may be affected, and here we go. Moving on, let's talk about the National Bank of Pakistan, because they suffered what two sources described as a destructive cyber attack. Now, this incident, which took place on the night between Friday and Saturday a week ago, impacted the bank's back-end systems and affected servers used to interlink the bank's branches, the back-end infrastructure controlling the bank's ATM network, and the bank's mobile app as well, meaning they got in pretty deep. Now, while the attack crippled some of these systems, no funds so far have been reported missing, according to the bank, and people familiar with the attack and current investigation said that it looks like the funds are in place. So we'll see what that happens, but if you bank with the National Bank of Pakistan, heads up to you. Moving on, let's talk about the BZX DeFi platform, because an attacker stole an estimated $55 million worth of cryptocurrency assets from BZX, a decentralized finance or DeFi platform that allows users to borrow, loan, and speculate on cryptocurrency price variations. And I quote, a BZX developer was sent a phishing email to his personal computer with a malicious macro in a Word document that was disguised as a legitimate email attachment. This is according to the company in a preliminary post-mortem of the attack this past Friday night, just hours after this hit. Now, BZX said that the email attachment ran a script on the developer's computer that compromised essentially the wallet phrase that the employee had. The attacker then proceeded to empty the developer's personal wallet and then stole 2 private keys from the employee's computer that were being used by the BZX platform for its integration with the Polygon and Binance Smart Chain blockchains. The attacker then used these keys to steal the platform's Polygon and BSC funds, along with the same funds from a small number of users who approved unlimited spend operations for the 2 tokens on their account. That totaled roughly $55 million US. Obviously a massive hit. So if you use the BZX DeFi platform for all your cryptocurrency needs, heads up to you. Moving on, let's talk about luxury jeweler Graf. They're out of the United Kingdom. Now, Graf is notable for its collection of some of the most rare and expensive diamonds, which has helped make it one of the preferred jewelers for the rich and famous, with the likes of former President Donald Trump and soccer star David Beckham possibly being affected, as they are both customers. This was a Conti ransomware gang hit, and the Daily Mail reported that Conti allegedly has already shared 69,000 confidential documents, including client lists, invoices, receipts, and credit notes on the dark web, as per the common tactic for extortion. So heads up to you if you use luxury high-end jeweler Graf out of the UK and David Beckham. Heads up to you as well. Moving on, let's talk about the Toronto Transit Commission. A ransomware attack disrupted the activities of the Toronto Public Transportation Agency and took down several systems used by drivers and commuters. The incident impacted several internal systems, such as the agency's internal email server and TTC Vision, a video-based driver communication system. This was replaced by was replaced by a classic radio-based communication system until the issue would be resolved. Basically, they couldn't use the videos, stream on the internet, so they went back to good old analog radio. Now, besides the TTC back-end systems, the incident also impacted customer-facing servers as well. The booking portal for Wheel-Trans, a transportation option for persons with disabilities, is still offline, or was offline as of about a week ago or so, and hopefully that is back online. I actually happen to know about Wheel-Trans because of my grandmother, who lived in Canada when she was alive and used to take that, given her disability at the time. So there you go. Hopefully, and it's a great service, but hopefully the TTC will get back online in Toronto. Moving on, let's talk about Cream Finance again, because attackers just have recently stolen an estimated $130 million worth of cryptocurrency from Cream Finance. It's another DeFi platform similar to BZX that I just talked about. The attackers are believed to have found a vulnerability in the platform's lending system called flash loaning, and it used that to steal all of Cream's assets and tokens running on the Ethereum blockchain, according to basically blockchain security firm BlockSec, which also posted an explanation of the security flaw on Twitter earlier in the week. This is the company's third hit this year. So if you're using Cream Finance, you really got to question why at this point. They just got hit for $130 million in Ethereum. Ouch. There you go. Moving on. Let's talk about the National Rifle Association, or NRA, here in the United States, because the operators of Grief, also known as Evil Corp ransomware, that basically listed the other day the U.S. National Rifle Association as a victim on their leak site. The organization's name was listed in their dark web portal, and the Grief Gang basically is looking for ransom. NRA is not saying much about this. We'll see where that goes, but if you're a friend or enemy of the National Rifle Association, heads up to you. Their information is probably out there or may possibly be dumped. We'll see if they pay or not. Moving on, let's talk about German multinational company Eber Spracher Group. They sent part of their factory workforce home on paid leave, while their management and IT were dealing with a ransomware attack that crippled their systems over the last weekend of October. Now, the company's official websites, email system, office networks, customer portals, and production systems were taken down as a result of this attack. They have over 10,000 employees. Obviously, that's costing them a good chunk of money. So hopefully they're back online. But if you have anything to do with the Eber Spracher Group in Germany, heads up to you. Hopefully you are restored. Moving on, let's talk about the state of Missouri's Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. In October, the St. Louis Dispatch discovered a flaw that potentially exposed Social Security numbers of an estimated 100,000 Missouri teachers. The incident reportedly happened on September 11th when a system employee's email account was accessed by an unauthorized individual. They are now offering 12 months of free credit and identity theft protection for all affected. That's typically compliance law. So there you go. If you are a teacher or have anything to do in Missouri with the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, you may be entitled to that 12 months. Check in. Moving on, let's talk about the West Virginia Parkways Authority. They were a victim this past Friday morning of a cyber attack, but apparently there was no breach of customer data, according to its executive director. All West Virginia Turnpike toll lanes were operating. Easy Pass accounts are functioning. So apparently it may be no harm, no foul in West Virginia. Heads up to you, drivers and Parkways Authority employees. Moving on. Let's talk about Russians who bought fake vaccine certificates. A database of Russians who purchased fake coronavirus vaccine certificates has leaked online. This is according to the Kommersant Business Daily that reported this past Friday, with experts warning that the buyers are now at risk of both blackmail and potential jail time, as it's illegal in Russia to buy a fake vaccine certificate, which I believe it is in most countries, including here in the United States. Now, according to the Kommersant, the names, phone numbers, and addresses of 500,000 fake QR code buyers from the Moscow region appear on the encrypted Telegram messaging app. This data can apparently be purchased for up to 40 rubles, roughly 55 cents US, per person. Now, the issue gained further urgency as lawmakers announced plans on Thursday to mandate the QR codes nationwide, and the Kremlin warned that these and other restrictions will only be lifted at the end of the coronavirus pandemic. So we could be looking at roughly 500,000 people in the Moscow area alone. Obviously, that is where the seat of power is for Russia, the Kremlin, essentially being hit and possibly being accused of crimes or charged with crimes. I'm curious to know how many of those 500,000 are actually government employees working at the Kremlin. Huge problem. Moving on, let's talk about Red Doors. This is a Singapore-based hospitality firm. This is actually an update. I talked about them last year. They just got fined $74,000 Singapore, which is roughly $54,000 US, in September for failing to prevent the external access and exfiltration of data. If you recall, millions of Red Doors accounts were sold on underground forums in September and October of last year. I did report on that. I went back and looked as I keep all of my notes, and here we are. They're getting fined. Probably would have been cheaper just to secure your stuff. Moving on. Let's talk about nonprofit community medical centers, or CMC, excuse me, not CMMC. For those of you listening, you know what that is, in the state of California. Now, in a statement issued on October 15, CMC said that, quote, some unusual network activity had been detected early on Sunday, October 10. Now, as a precaution, they shut down their entire network. We're talking servers, computers, phone lines, all that kind of stuff. And obviously that's a huge problem because patients had been using those to access their medical records, make appointments, receive information related to things like COVID-19 and on. Now, the data may have been obtained by attackers, includes medical information, first and last names, mailing addresses, dates of birth, demographic information, social security numbers, and more. We are looking at 656,047 individuals potentially compromised in this incident. So if you use community medical centers in California, heads up to you. Moving on. Let's talk about Washington Central Unified School District. On October 24th of this year, the school district learned that it was a victim of a cybersecurity attack. The attackers deployed malware and basically encrypted the network, so it's a ransomware attack, and we're talking about locking out systems, files, all that normal kind of stuff, and the information impacted was probably, or stolen, was names, address, dates of birth, certain information in the student's education records, and potential allergy and prescription information in student files. Student social security numbers were not involved in the attack, nor were credit or debit cards. Teachers and staff and related individuals that are basically employed may have had compromised names, address, dates of birth, health insurance information, social security numbers, and in some instances, financial account information, especially if you're on direct deposit. At this time, there is no indication that any student, teacher, or staff has been affected. That's the standard boilerplate that they all say because they don't necessarily know, but heads up to you if you have anything to do with the Washington Central Unified Union School District. You may be entitled at some point to compensation. Moving on, let's talk about Electronic Warfare Associates, or EWA. This is a US-based defense contractor. They're DoD. You want to talk about the CMMC? Here we are. Now, they had a phishing attack that had, quote, some limited impact on EWA email accounts, and this is according to their notification letter. Their investigation determined that an attacker broke into their email accounts on October 2nd of this year. The organization learned of this attack when the intruder attempted to perform a wire transfer fraud. The investigation found that names, social security numbers, and or driver's license numbers in downloaded files and in the email box may have been impacted. So if you have anything to do with Electronic Warfare Associates, the U.S. defense contractor, heads up to you. Moving on, and finally, and we've got two finalies for you. Again, this was a longer video. We're talking about police surveillance footage here in the United States, specifically the Dallas Police Department and Georgia's State Patrol. An activist group has leaked nearly 2 terabytes of police helicopter footage, according to initial report from Wired. Now, what's incredible about this is that the videos from these 2 police departments were actually attacked and stolen from an unsecured cloud instance. Nearly 2 terabytes of leaked footage come from activist group known as Distributed Denial of Secrets, although they didn't say who specifically discovered and saved these videos. Additionally, while whistleblowing protocols is considered a political act here in the United States, it remains unclear as to whom the act was affiliated with, meaning who actually did this? What was their motivation? Distributed denial of secrets isn't telling us. They're kind of like WikiLeaks, where if I've got, let's say, this police footage, I can go and they will dump it out there, and there you are. Now, activist groups like DDoS Secrets or distributed denial of secrets, and also Fight for the Future argue that this footage, if you will, highlights the lengths that law enforcement have gone in terms of expanding the surveillance state here in the United States. And so you can sift through these 2 terabytes of actual police footage. We are constantly being monitored. Cameras are going up everywhere. Here we are. I'll leave that argument for a later date. Moving on. And our last, finally, is state-sponsored hackers. This is interesting because cybersecurity firm Palo Alto Networks, they make things like firewalls, threat detection systems, all that kind of stuff. They basically warned over this past weekend of an ongoing hacking campaign that has already resulted in the compromise of at least 9 organizations worldwide from critical sectors, including defense, healthcare, energy, technology, and education. And basically, to breach these organizations' networks, the threat actors behind this cyber espionage campaign exploited a critical vulnerability in Zoho's enterprise password management solution known as Management Engine AD Self-Service Plus, which allowed remote execution code on unpatched systems without authentication and got them in. Now, the attacks observed by Palo Alto Networks researchers started on September 17th with scans for vulnerable servers 9 days after the U.S. Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, or CISA, warned that it detected exploits used in the wild, and 1 day after a joint advisory published by the CISA, the FBI, and the United States Coast Guard Cyber Command. If you didn't know, the Coast Guard has their own cyber command. Now, exploitation attempts began on September 22nd after 5 days of harvesting info on potential targets who hadn't patched their systems. Again, we're talking about that specific Zoho product. Now, following this joint advisory, the researchers observed another series of unrelated attacks that failed to compromise their targets, hinting at other state-backed or financially motivated hacking groups likely joining in to exploit companies on Zoho servers. Right now, according to Palo Alto Networks scans, there are over 11,000 internet-exposed servers running vulnerable Zoho software, and it's currently unknown how many of the systems have been patched. So if you're running Zoho as a platform publicly, you've got to make sure that you are updating this. And the reason why this is one of the finalies is that we have seen this massive rash of state-sponsored attacks, especially on US-based systems, coming from adversarial countries like Russia and China. Look at SolarWinds, look at Colonial Pipeline, look at all of these. And a lot of these groups that are sitting in, let's say, the borders of Russia that are getting a free pass are oftentimes being used by Russian intelligence to essentially do that. Now, Palo Alto is not saying it's the Russians, it's the Chinese, it's the Iranians, it's whoever, but all indicators of compromise point to state-sponsored espionage given the sophistication, the capability, and the way that essentially this vulnerability is being exploited. This is not, somebody, just trying to figure things out. This is a smooth operation that is attempting to maintain persistence. It's doing reconnaissance. And so that obviously is a huge problem. And so I leave it with that. It really underscores the need that if you have anything in your life, I don't care if it's an iPhone, an Android, a public-facing massive server that 1,000 people are connecting to or 1 million people are connecting to, you have to keep these things up to date. Otherwise, you could be basically ending up with a ransomware attack, loss of data, loss of reputation, a life-ending event for your business or your organization, or worse. And so those were your breaches of the week, or the last 2 weeks, I should say, and it was really great to sit here and do this video again. They're always a lot of work. Today was a longer day, but it's so worth it, and I'm looking forward to seeing you next week as well. And please like, share, follow me here on Facebook and Twitter at NickAESP, and please feel free to subscribe to me at YouTube as well. And as always, stay safe, stay online, and please stay private. Thanks, everyone.